Where's hometown for you? Where were you born?
I was born in Titusville, Pennsylvania, but Jamestown's the hometown. We came here when I was 5 years old.
Talk a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, Dad worked at Quality Markets. He started when he was a young teenager. They put a orange crate for him to stand on to run the register, and he stayed with them until he retired. Retired as a VP in Quality Markets, and Mother had 11 children, one of which was me, third child, first boy. And very close family. We're burying them one by one now because we're older. It happens, as you know, as well as many of the swimmers and my swimming coach, Dick Bauer, which we'll talk about later. That's about it. Big family, a lot of fun, very close. Mom and Dad. Mom was a cook. She cooked for everybody, made bread all the time for everybody, and very, very nice mother, very dedicated. When she laughed, the house shook. And they played cards and enjoyed entertaining at home, so it was quite often that we were sleeping and we'd hear this laugh and the house would shake. Then she had her stroke and she went downhill pretty fast. In older age, they had diseases and illnesses just like everybody. She had heart bypasses and some sugar, and Daddy went out. They all went out pretty good in their 80s, yeah. But they had a good life.
Growing up in Titusville, was that whole Colonel Drake, the well, was that all part of your wealth?
It had nothing to do with us. Of course, we're aware of it, and they did take the Titusville newspaper for quite a while because it was a good newspaper, very newsy. When we moved to Jamestown, they had it here. But we saw the well, of course, and that's where oil was. There was a lot of oil money in Titusville. Mother's daddy was a steel man, and Dad's dad we never met. He died from illnesses that he caught down in the war in, where did we go, down south?
Civil War.
No, Roosevelt's war, the first one before the war, the little skirmish.
American.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, down there. Yeah. He caught some disease there and he died younger. Dad's family was very small, about 4 or 5. One of his brothers was adopted, Carl Radack, and those are the Radacks that are now in Lakewood, and that's a large family also. They had 11 or 12 children. That would be Dad's adopted brother. But other than that, Jamestown since we were 5 years old.
Now, he came up here, was he at the time part of Quality? When he
yes, he worked with Quality from the time he was, like I say, 8 or 9 years old.
Was that the readings?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The old man reading was the founder of Cash and Go Groceries, really nationally one of the first in the series. Everybody bought their groceries and you marked them down, and then payday they paid you the grocery money. Was the tradition in that industry, and they started with the cash and carry where they could put out product a little cheaper than the corner store, and that pretty much started right down Brooklyn Square. The old Brooklyn Square is where they had the first cash and carry.
So Roland Reading, I think was his name.
I'm not sure Roland was the old man or adopted son, one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's your dad's world. Did you, as you were growing up, did you work there? Were you?
Everybody worked there. Some. I worked, I think, in inventory coming back from college once, and not too much other than that. Most of my jobs were newspaper, caddying, the things that young boys do. I had a job from my time. I was about 9 years old until they retired me from UBS quite a while ago, probably 10, 15 years now. I don't do very well with dates, but ballpark, that's what we're talking about.
So you were, as a kid growing up in Jamestown, this would have been the mid-40s. We're at war.
Yes, sir.
We are. Do you, since you're born in 37, it's been a little bit before you, but does your family talk about 1941, Pearl Harbor, the Japs, things like that?
We didn't visit too much about that at home, but of course we were eminently aware of it. The old polka dot restaurant down by the YMCA where we spent a lot of our time, those fellas had a map and they followed the battles and things like that. So we were certainly aware of it. And of course, we played guns and machine guns and shot each other and things like we did during the war. We played war games all the time.
You remember your mom and dad talking about it much around the
No,
table?
not really.
And so, do you remember, now you would have been a little bit older, like close to maybe 8 years old, 9 years old, when the war ended and there was sort of celebrations in Jamestown. Is that a memory for you?
No, sir.
Yeah.
We were happy, of course, when it ended. I can recall that, but no, this was not a, hoop-de-doo for us. Carl Radack, Dad's brother that I mentioned earlier from Lakewood, the adopted brother, served as a paratrooper, but Dad, because of the size of his family and his job in the food industry, he did not serve at all. He didn't have to.
Do you remember rations?
Say again?
Rations. I mean, you're
oh, absolutely, rations, and we saved cans and paper and things. We did a lot of work. Poppy flowers that we picked.
Really?
Yeah, that we turned in for the parachute. They told us. I don't know, but yeah, we had a lot of that memory. We definitely did our rationing, and we did all the stuff that we did during the war.
It's out of curiosity, 11, 12, 10 siblings, 11, 12.
Yes, sir.
What was it like at home?
It was very friendly, very nice, really. We were quite disciplined. My mother's mother was kind of harsh. We went there on occasion, probably maybe half a dozen times or more a year, back to Titusville to visit. And she was quite strict. With your elbows on the table, she'd crack them with a knife, and I mean crack them. You didn't do that at her house. And we learned our manners. We were quite strict about please and thank you and all that kind of stuff. It was very good. Well done.
Did you go to parochial school then as part of your elementary school education? Was it even available at the time here in Jamestown?
Say again?
Parochial schools?
Oh, parochial schools, all we did, absolutely. Oh, everybody.
Yeah.
In fact, I had trouble. I had to go to the Y for athletics. St. Pete's didn't have any athletics, and I had to get permission from Monsignor Patrick F. Toub and Shuren Bicora to go to the YMCA because they used the wrong Bible in their services.
Ah.
And you weren't supposed to do that as a Catholic. A very different background in Catholicity than what we have today. Now, today, Catholics, just like everybody else, are universal, and we try to worship God in our own way. It was not that way. You'd almost go to hell if you walked by a Protestant church, for goodness sake. It was pretty big. And of course, we had nuns that taught us through all the grades. They were quite strict and like to hit with the ruler or whatever. I was not a good student at all.
So we've interviewed a few folks. Do you have a memory or two of the discipline that you would have at that?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of discipline, a lot of discipline.
Talk about it. Give us a story.
One of the folklore stories that we use, and it's true, they told me I had to stay after school one day, and I said, I can't stay after school. I have to deliver newspapers. That's my job. Oh, Bill, you were naughty. You have to stay after school. So I took my book bag and threw it out the window and said I had to go to the bathroom. Well, I have to let you go to the bathroom. I went down and peddled my papers anyways. I got a lot of trouble over that, but the people got their newspaper. That was what my job was.
More importantly, when they got back and saw that you'd escaped out the bathroom window, what was your penalty?
I didn't go out the bathroom window. No, I threw my bag out. I went out the front door after I said I had to go to the bathroom. And then I just, they don't follow you to the bathroom. You never did.
So the Monsignor the next day didn't...
I don't think I got involved with the priest for that incident, but the nuns weren't very happy at all.
So there was another incident with the Monsignor?
Oh, lots and lots, but that was probably the one that's most folklorish. One of the nuns, a little bitty girl that taught us in the 8th grade, got so frustrated she was pulling my hair and kicking my head when the guy said, stop! So she did. But of course, we didn't retaliate at all, and that's how bad I was. I mean, these girls, one of them passed out when we were teaching. She was writing on the blackboard. Boom. And the nun said that was because we were naughty. I can remember parochial school 2nd grade. Mother said, you go get a haircut. I said, fine, Mom. So she gave me 50 cents, which is what it was. And I went down and said, now what kind of haircut you want? I said, I want a pig shave. He said, no, you don't want a pig shave, Bill. Nobody has a pig shave. I said, no, Mom said I wanted a pig shave. I want a pig shave. Said, well, you take off all your hair. I said, I don't care, Mom said. So he did. He gave me a pig shave. And when I got to the parochial school the next day, they sent me around to all the grades so they could see what a pig shave looked like. For some reason, that was quite novel. But I didn't mind. I didn't know any better. That pig shave's a pig shave. Now I have one naturally, and that's all right too. But those are some of the things for parochial school. Very close class. We knew all of our peers, and we pretty much stayed together. You couldn't go to, like I say, a public school was, you couldn't go to the YMCA, you couldn't do a lot of things. That's just the way the religion was at that time.
So you went St. Peter's and Paul, 1943 to 53, and then you went to JHS. Was that a difficult thing to go from a smaller parochial,
Not really.
Bigger school?
Not at all.
No.
Just what you're supposed to do. Pretty much that's the way my life was. I did what we were supposed to do regardless, and that's the way things went, you know.
You're known for swimming. How did you get introduced to that world?
Well, really, I think motivation and recognition were a very important part of my upbringing. When I ducked my head, I was 8 years old, first time in Canada Lake on a family outing, and I got recognition for that. Now, hey, that's great. So then the YMCA came up, and I got permission to go because, as I say, we didn't have athletics at the parochial school, and at the YMCA I learned to swim. And I liked it because that's about all we had. We went regularly every time for our swimming lessons, for our open swim, and for Saturday we had a swim open and then stayed there for the movie and things at the Y. They took good care of children at that point in time. When I was, I think, 9 or 10, maybe 11, I was able to join the swim team. It was 14 and under, but they needed a backstroker and nobody wanted to swim backstroke, so that's how I got started. Wendell Hill, I think, was our coach at that time. And that was before all the modern swimming. Dick Bauer really was responsible for Jamestown swimming getting recognition and getting started. We, as children, he carried us to summer meets all over the country, literally. We went to Watertown, Marysville, a lot of different places in the summertime to compete as children. And that's the first anybody had done, except for perhaps swimming at the Buffalo or a meet type thing to children.
So at the YMCA, who was sort of the director? Do you remember the name of the person who kind of ran it?
Didn't pay attention to directors, just the coach. Whatever he said went.
Okay. And at the Y, it was Bowder?
At the Y what?
Who was your coach at the YMCA?
Oh, Dick Bauer was the first, as I mentioned, Wendell Hill was the first coach, but the real coach was Dick Bauer. He, and on Dick, first of all, he's a Sports Hall of Fame national swimming member, you know. A couple of short stories on Dick. The first time I came across Dick, I didn't know it was Dick Bauer, but some college kid was at a Buffalo swim meet watching it. And I was disqualified for swimming backstroke in a relay. It was supposed to be a freestyle relay. And he came down and protested, raised all kind of hell, and I got reinstated. Well, he didn't know me from Adam, he didn't know Jamestown from Adam, but he knew it wasn't fair to disqualify this kid. So, as a stranger, Dick took care of us. And then the second time, of course, when he came to Jamestown and started swimming and working with the children, Dick was very dedicated. In fact, I would wake him up at 6 o'clock in the morning at his house, and he would drive to the Y with me, and we would swim before school and after school. He walked most of the laps I swam, not all, of course, but most of the laps I swam. He volunteered to have the first swimming team from the high school at the Y. We didn't even have a pool, but he had the Y open and coordinated so we could swim against a couple of high schools and get some competition. So he was the first high school swim coach in the modern era. Now, before the 40s, I don't know. We didn't come here till early 40s. There was some swimming back in the early 30s, YMCA to YMCA type thing, but I'm not involved in that or not informed about it.
What do you think that, your backstroke is what you initially became known for? Why did no one else want to do that? I mean,
it's a difficult stroke to learn for some swimmers. Now, I always say that you get to look at the pretty girls and you breathe whenever you want to is what's good about the backstroke. Now, it may or may not be true, but that's a good story, I think.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Did somebody introduce you to that fact, or did you just pick it up one day in the pool and?
No, they needed a backstroker, so they worked with me on the backstroke.
And you became really good at that. I mean, you set some meet records that.
Eventually, I did a lot of swimming, but I didn't do a lot of good swimming. We were at a meet in Erie. Their pool was like a dungeon, very short, dark, old pool. It was dual meet, and we finished, and I went out and got a banana for some reason. Oh, I know. Coach mentioned bananas were good food on the way down to the meet. So I went out and got a couple of bananas, ate a couple of bananas, and came back to little Dick, said, "Go put your suit on." I said, "What?" He said, "Put your suit on, you're going to swim again." I said, "Dick, I finished, the meet's over. I don't have to." "Yeah, I think you can swim better than you're doing. You got to swim again." So I put on my suit, and that's the first time I ever broke 107 in the 100 back. At that time, 107 was enough to win most places, but I thought I was doing pretty good. Well, I finally broke 105, and that's where I broke into the national swimming category, which is 101, 102 at that time. Now everybody's swimming in the 50s, 51, 52. I'm just amazed how swimming has advanced. I worked out maybe 3 hours a day. No, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. Now, most swimmers are working 3 hours a day and not thinking a thing about it. They swim morning and night, and they swim long and hard. It's a little different today.
You became the first Jamestown All-American. Mm-hmm. And was that premised upon time? I mean,
strictly time. And the coaches, in fact, the coaches are responsible for anything that any swimmer does. And that's why parents look for the coach that can work with their children. He's so important to their lives, not just the discipline of going back and forth all the time. That's important, and changing the stroke, that's important, but the character and the molding and the discipline it takes to do that stuff is what the coach is responsible for. What was the question again?
Well, about being an All-American.
Well, Greg,
I'm reading this 102.8.
That was the time that he submitted, and that was the best time I think I swam at that time in senior in high school. He submitted it, and it was one of the top 10 times in the country, so they made me an All-American, and that was quite a nice recognition, I thought. But if the coach hadn't submitted the time, nobody would have known anything about it.
Where was it? Do you remember where that meet was?
Well, I don't, because we swam so many, you know, but it had to be a recognized meet and recognized pool and all this kind of certified pool, and the timers had to have 3 watches, et cetera, et cetera. But Dick did what was required. He also was responsible for many of the scholarship offers that I had, writing to the coaches and letting them know. I can remember one summer meet we went to, particularly stands out in my mind. Doc Councilman was there. And Doc was one of the foremost coaches in the world. He's also in that Hall of Fame that I mentioned earlier where Dick is, but he just about captured him. And made him look at my stroke and coach me after meet. And that's the kind of coach Dick was. Excuse me, anything for his kids. But many years later, we were at Indianapolis International meet, swimming. Doc had a little session where the swimmers could go and say hello. And he said, "Hello, Bill," and I was shocked that Doc remembered me from that encounter. That's many, many years later, but that's how close Doc and Dick were, and it was quite interesting, really.
Just for the camera, just so everybody knows that Bill won that All-American honor in 1955, and that the next All-American to come from Jamestown, Carl Carson, was 1995. You're talking 40 years. You were the only one to come from this area to be an All-American. That's amazing.
Well, swimming has improved so much that, as they say, Johnny Weissmuller would even be a qualifier. And I wouldn't either. As a matter of fact, the high school kids are swimming much, much faster than I ever dreamed of swimming, or anybody swam at the time. That's how much we've improved the sport, and it's amazing. We got a video of one of the not grandchildren, cousins swimming currently, and he's swimming in 100 back. There are heats of people under 55 in 100 back. In fact, they're doing 52, 53 just to get in there. Their winning is 51 plus, 50 plus. That's how fast the sport is. 105, 102 was great swimming when I was a kid. Very different, very evolved. As I say, the discipline and the sports that they work on are huge, huge.
The flip was always the problem I could never get. There's techniques to all of that flip. Did you, the old days you kind of hit it, turned around and came back. Did you flip around?
Well, that brings up a story. As a child, 11, 12, 13 years old, young teenager, I was not a good student, as I mentioned earlier, but I did read about 2 books that I can recall. One was swimming, and it was Kippeth, that was the backstroker at the time. His coach wrote a book, and it was about this turn that you're talking about. But at the same time, I was interested in girls, so I read about how to get along with girls as a teenager, and those are the 2 books I can clearly remember studying as a child. But with the flip turn, yes, we did it every lap we swam. We did a flip turn, period. Yeah. In fact, we had Bill Boris throwing my stomach off the diving board one day when I was doing backstroke under the board. His fault, not mine. And I had to finish my laps, which we always did. He broke his nose, but I got to finish my set that I was on, and that's just the way we did it. We didn't stop swimming for anything. When you were supposed to swim 20, pull 20, kick 20, etc., that's what you did. So that's kind of everything on the flip turn. Yes, we did a lot of flip turns then, and we did have to touch on our back and go over. Now, the kids, and I can't get the new turn just like you couldn't get that turn, Greg. The new turn is you get on your stomach just before you touch the wall, and you do a from back to front flip and then come off backwards. But I haven't got it yet because I can't wear goggles, I don't wear a nose plug, and I can't see the wall, so I have a lot of trouble. And I don't do flip turns when I swim now. I just do open turns, which is not the way to compete. Okay. Not good at all. But yeah, I did study the turn and worked with Coach on it. We had a good turn.
Well, it's a technique. Now, that's not the only stroke you did. I mean, you did the freestyle, you did other things. Like they say, I play golf now. Well, I don't break 100 very often. That's how poor a golfer I am, but I do go out and, as you quote, say golf. Same with the other strokes. I do them. I'm old enough now in master swimming that most of the competition is dead, Greg, so I can just about do any short race. I like to say I finished the race before my heart knows I'm in the race, and that's why I swim the short ones. If I try to swim long, I could have a problem. I've had a couple of bypasses and pacemaker and a lot of stuff going on physically that takes a lot out of me. I can't do any endurance stuff at all, so I have to do short stuff. Well, they were talking about in your article that in this would have been 1955 time period, you tied the pool mark in the 40-yard freestyle, the 160-yard individual medley, and the 100-yard backstroke. That requires some serious abilities. Well,
it's just what Coach tells you to do, that's all. I mean, you do what you were told.
Was your favorite the backstroke? I mean, was that...
Yeah, it's the only stroke I could be successful. In fact, that same coach, Doc Councilman, had a swimmer back in the 50s, George Breen, who was a world champion freestyler. Distance freestyle, a miler, I think he held the record. And if he wasn't first, he was up there. But we were at a summer meet in Cortland, I think it was. George flipped over on his back and he was going to swim the backstroke with me. And I laughed. He's a freestyle. He cleaned my clock real good.
Really?
He beat me good, and I thought, oh my God. So that was George Breen, really a good swimmer. And the other instance that's unusual is we were at a meet in Ohio, and Coach said, you go to lane 4 and get in there. You know, they didn't sign lanes, so I went and I sat in lane 4. And this tall guy came up and he said, I called for this lane. I said, what? He said, I called for this lane. I said, no, Coach told me to swim here and I'm swimming here. And there was a big to-do about it, but they finally moved me over to an end lane. I was so upset that I swam into the wall on the first lap, and of course that was the end of the race, but I beat him on the first lap before I swam in the wall. It turned out to be a swimmer which was at Ohio State with me later on, and he was a very good swimmer at that time. In fact, he was at Ohio State when he swam against me. I was still in high school. But he cleaned my clock, and I moved over like I was supposed to.
Well, I'm just looking at some of these headlines. Jamestown swimmer wins Rochester meet. JHS swim star wins state title. Radack wins lake swim. Bill Radack sets new backstroke swim mark in Watertown. Young Y team was surprised in state meet. Bill Radack wins at Watertown. Radack Fetzer repeat in lake swimming meet. And lake local swimmers win honors at Lake Ontario. Jamestown's Bill Radack cracks backstroke mark. Radack's record paces NFL Merman and BAC Invitational. All of this was in high school.
Yes, Greg, but like I say, Coach took us all over the country, very dedicated to our swimming, got in swimming early and late. He didn't do that for any other swimmers. The only one I swam in the morning was by myself with Coach. But he took everybody to all these meets. That was his job. And any of those records I swam, Dick said, you've got to swim this now, so I did. Butterfly is the only stroke I didn't like. In fact, I got my pacemaker exploded twice when I tried to do butterfly. Now, just after a workout, I would try to swim a lap butterfly, and bingo, you know, the thing shocks you.
Really?
So I don't do butterfly very well, very often.
I gave it up a long time ago, Randy, in case you're curious. It hurts. So, with all of that success, Bill, in high school, did the colleges come knocking on your door?
Dick Bauer again sent out all my times and my resumes to all the colleges, and yes, we had several scholarship offers, but the academic schools, Yale, Harvard, and Dartmouth, those guys wanted me to go to prep school for a year because I was such a poor student. And Daddy said, no, you can't waste a year of your life. You've got to get your college education, get going. So he went down, Dad went down with me to Ohio State, and we talked to Mike Pepe, who was that coach, and he said he would be sure that I graduated. So we decided on Ohio State, and that's where I went. At that time, Ohio State was a big school for swimming, but it was a big school because of recruiting. I didn't know that at the time. For example, we had Greg Louganis' coach was a roommate of mine in college. Ronnie O'Brien was from Pittsburgh. Those coaches, or those swimmers, all coached each other. One diver would dive while 7 guys would critique it. And that's just how we had the best divers in the country. Several of those kids ended up coaching diving, and as I say, Greg Louganis' coach was one of those boys. And same with swimming. Coach recruited great swimmers, Mike Pepe did, but he wasn't a real swimming coach like Dick Bauer at all, nothing like Dick Bauer. He kind of let you do what you wanted to, work out when you wanted to, check on your studies occasionally, that type of thing. We went on a scholarship, but I had to work several jobs to stay there.
Was that a difficult acclimation? I mean, here you are.
No, not at all.
No?
No.
Big
Because of the big
like
family, and you know, he's working all the time. It was fine, and
yeah.
no difference. I should have studied more than I did, but you know.
So, talk to me about during, you were there through 1960 in Columbus. Was the Michigan-Ohio State game a big deal then?
Oh, very much so, Mike. In fact, I took football from who was Woody Hayes at football class when I was in physical education. I changed the business because I couldn't pass English, so I had to go where I could get passing grades for swimming, and I had to drop the idea of being a swim coach and became a businessman instead in my educational prowess. But what was the question?
No, Woody. Well, the football. You were starting to talk about Woody.
Oh
Hayes.
yeah. Oh well, Woody and the coach down in Michigan had the original of the confrontation earlier. Not a lot, maybe probably 10, 5, 8, some period before I got there. But when I got there, yes, very, very much so. We went to those games and we still do, and still did then and before then. But big confrontation, good sports, tough.
Was Woody, now talk about you. Did Woody Hayes teach you?
Yeah, well, he taught all the children that were in physical education, not phys ed, physical education at the time. He ran a class for us, and that was kind of fun.
What was he like?
Woody Hayes was a scholar, literally a scholar, very, very intellectual guy. Didn't come across that way, but he was a student of history, great student of history, military student, and a good disciplinarian. His troops did what they were supposed to do. In fact, the time he got in trouble in the field was because he had coached his boys and they'd done all they could. He was frustrated about them not winning and not being ahead and about the call. He ran on the field and assaulted one of the players, and that's why he lost his job. That's the kind of guy he was. He'd grab your 45 and you charge the enemy once you're done. He was that way.
That got a lot of, that's a great video. Woody Hayes pounding on it. One of those guys. So you graduate from 1960, and by the way, just continue some of these highlights. I mean, back before you went to Ohio State, Radack is named the best schoolboy swimmer in Western New York. That's remarkable when you think of your team was relatively new. There was not a long history of Jamestown High School swimming like it is now. I mean, you were kind of new.
Nobody had Dick Bauer in their pocket, but we did in Jamestown. He really started modern swimming and brought swimming to the fro. The high school pool, I don't know how many years they discussed it or had it on drawing boards, but we wouldn't have gotten one if Dick hadn't brought swimming up to the front. We had international meets at the local Y pool, which is a small 20-yard course. We had teams come down from Canada and a lot of, as I say, travel and things that Dick did for us. But that's how we got swimming going here.
Did you stay in touch with Dick after you were from Ohio State?
Not very much. Dick came to one swim meet, and this is another story on Dick. And same thing happened when I was a child swimming, and he got me into the backstroke qualification. We were swimming Michigan at the time, coincidentally, and there wasn't the rivalry that there was in football, but there was a rivalry. They were swimming a 440, and Dick was in the stands. He came. That's the only meet he came to, but he was at that meet. And they had to finish the 440 in the middle of the pool because it was an odd length, you know, 25-yard course, and they had to do that. But what happened was the coaches gave to Ohio State first place and the other guy second place. Well, Dick said, no, 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 and he came out of the stands, made a big stink about Ohio State getting beaten. Here's my coach talking to Mike Pepe and raising hell with the officials. So, yeah, he always stuck up for swimmers. That's the kind of guy he was. I can remember a tussle in high school. I don't know what happened, but for some reason Dick and I were in a confrontation in the locker room. Nothing vicious, just messing around. Somehow, in the course of wrestling with him, I threw him down on the floor, and he bounced up, and he would have killed me if he did hit me, but he held himself back, and that's the only instance I can remember where we had a confrontation of any kind, and how it happened, I still don't recall, but it was so quick, and then it was over after he bounced off the floor. He got very defensive. I should almost offensive. That would have been a bad thing.
What happened to him? They weren't, you know?
He left here and went to Pittsburgh. Left Pittsburgh, went to college. Continued, in fact, he came back to Jamestown and coached in Shrewsbury, a summer camp for a couple of years too, a traveling coach. Dick, I never knew Dick to do anything immoral in my life, but he was married and divorced a couple of times. Married one of his swimmers, Linda Brown, for a short period. Linda's very bitter about it. I don't understand the story or the background there, but they're divorced, and then he had a couple of swimming kids. His own children did well in swimming, but I ran into him at nationals, and he wasn't competing. He was there as a coach. Geez, I don't know. It had to be in the 2000 plus years, in 2000 to 2005 era. But I ran into him there at the national Y meet.
You graduate in 1960. Was it natural then to go to the service?
No, not really. I came home and worked at the toy store, kind of floundering around looking what to do and whatnot.
On Pine Street, toy store?
Pine Street was our homestead, yeah. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't even mention it because it's now gone into a slum area. The hometown is the home palace is just terrible. It's slums up in that whole area now. Why, I don't know. When Dad was there and spent a lot of money on the house, putting in extra room for the children. I slept in the attic in high school, uninsulated. I was up there by myself. I used to stand at the bottom of the stairs, catch my breath, run up and jump into bed and freeze for a while, and then slept very comfortably. I had all that privacy, the whole attic to myself. Eventually, though, they paneled it and isolated it and put boys upstairs. So, but yeah, it was interesting. As I say, though, Price Street is a mess now. I'm ashamed to admit that's where our homestead was. It's that bad.
So you came back from school. You came back to Jamestown, and the Marines did they come calling you, or did you?
I was drafted in the Army.
Ah.
And I reported for the draft, and they took me to Buffalo, and they said, has anybody ever been arrested? And I said, well, what about? Well, I threw a firecracker, and the guy said he would never tell anybody. And who did it? Who did it? I said, well, I did it. So the cops had to come and take me down. And did you have firecrackers? Yes, I did. And they said, well, you can't draft you today. You have to go home. So they took me back. At that time, I contacted the Marines and said I'd like to become a Marine. They said, okay. So they let me become a Marine, and I went through the camp and the regular training and stuff.
Where was boot camp?
It wasn't really boot camp. We went to officer training at Quantico, and it was, that's another story. I had no problem with the athletics at all, or the academic or anything else, but for some reason, I did something you weren't supposed to. We were out of maneuvers, and I told one of the sergeants, halt, you're covered. And he charged my position, so I shot him. I mean, what else are you going to do? This guy didn't halt. And he was ready to bust me, just like Coach Bauer was years before. He never did, but he was ready to. So they had to recycle me. I had to go through training twice because of that incident. You weren't supposed to shoot the air. Well, what was I supposed? I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to butt stroke him, so I shot him. They were blanks, of course, but still, they didn't like that. So that's kind of fun.
You shoot a commanding officer, it's
No, he's sergeant, the commanding officer, and he charged my position, Greg. What am I going to do? I told you to halt, you're covered. You was covered all right.
So you went recycled through again and finally get out of Quantico.
Yeah.
Then what's the next career, next path? Where do you go in the Marines? Where do you go next?
Well, we went to Barstow, California. Well, no. First we had some duty at Quantico. That was officer training at Camp Lejeune after Quantico. And we were at Camp Lejeune for supply school. That was the MOS they gave me. I asked out of Hawaii school, supply school, I asked for Hawaii, Guam, and the West Coast. And they put me in the middle of the Mojave Desert with my wife, no children at the time. Well, it turned out to be the best cruise you ever could have had. All the officers were young, their wives were young, their wives were pregnant. They hung out at the swimming pool, we hung out at the office. Outside, they had to carry a bucket full of water to put the tools in, because that's how hot it was outside. But that was the duty station that we had, and it was wonderful. That's where we had 2 of our 4 children, and it was good duty. After that, we kind of just hopped around from place to place, but that was the best cruise we had. I served with Seabees in Nam. That was an interesting cross-service billet. With the Navy, Seabees, I was a liaison to the Marines, and actually, I didn't do much liaisoning. I ran my supply yard of Milcon materials coming in and going to the different projects during country in Da Nang. That was that cruise, which was interesting. Tough being without the family, but I enjoyed the service, and it was good work.
So you're the supply officer?
Yes, sir.
So you're I'm envisioning those guys at McHale's Navy type of thing, the supplies officers. The stuff comes in, and sometimes you kind of have, you know where some of this stuff goes. We interviewed a Seabee who was a World War II guy who was telling stories. So I bet you got a story about being in control.
What he told you was correct. it was law, and I mean very strict law. You didn't do anything for yourself. For the unit's benefit, you could do most anything. We had, in the middle of Vietnam now, picture this, you got a cooler full of beer. The kids had steak 3 times a day if they wanted it. And that's what you're talking about. We did do a lot of scrounging, we called it. And as long as it was for the unit, it was fine, but you didn't do anything on your own. We built a flush toilet in the middle of the yard because the indigenous workers that I employed were pooping all over the yard. That's just what they did. That's the way they're brought up. Well, about the 3rd day that the flush toilet was in operation, one of the indigenous shit all over the car seat, all over the toilet seat, because they couldn't sit where somebody else was sitting, and so that didn't work very good.
So you're in control of a lot of distribution within, and as the stuff comes in and has to go out, sometimes there's making, at least in World War II, Seabees, they kind of hung on to some stuff for the good of the unit, as you said. Hung
on or bartered and got what we needed. Yeah. We needed gas tank because we had to keep our trucks going. I had to fill the gas tank, so somehow we showed up with a big gas tank. We mounted it and had a gas gun. Had that filled periodically. The only incident that I can, well, there were a couple, but the one that I recall best was, for some reason we had a bulldozer that was plowing too close to the shoreline, and the thing got stuck, and they couldn't get it out, and it's a big, heavy piece of equipment. We finally ended up with 2 Amtraks in succession dragging the thing out, so they got that out, but that's the kind of stuff that happened. I overloaded a truck one day with rebar, not understanding what I should have known about rebar. It's very, very heavy, and when you put a lot of it on a truck, it makes that truck very heavy. We sunk a barge going across the river with that on it, so we didn't put so much rebar on the trucks anymore, but that was something that happened that was unusual. In fact, in Nam, I had a little moped that I rode around in because I wanted to get from the base where I was stationed back to 9th, the headquarters on liaison and trips, and so I had a little moped that I rode. That was good transportation for us.
Did you have any interaction at all with the Vietnamese people?
Indirectly, yes. We employed what they called Nung guards. Well, when I first got in country, there was a Nung guard, big, tall Chinaman, had double multi weapons on him, and he was up all night by himself watching the street and making sure that the CB headquarters were taken care of. So I thought, well, Nung guards like this guy. I wasn't so sure of my guard, so I took him to a fire range, and I had one guy that couldn't hit the target from 50 yards with an M14, so I gave him my lighter weapon. He couldn't hit the target with that, so he became a laborer the next day. So these weren't the Nung guards that I meant. These were guys who were indigenous, and we had laborers indigenous to help stack lumber and things. So yes, I was involved in. I did some liaison with Madam Nam, who was a go-between with the VC. When we had to go get lumber, we had to go to VC country, and she would negotiate. So we actually paid the Viet Cong to get supplies to use in country. Sure. Not a lot, but some, and enough that it's worth noting that that's just the way a war is fought, you know. She was my contact with the bad guys. When
you were there, was there a sense of what was going on politically at that point? Because this is the 60s.
No, politics played no part. As a Marine now, we were aware, for example, I still don't like Jane Fonda because of her nonsense up in Illinois, but we didn't discuss or worry about politics at all. We just did what we were told. That was the way it was as a Marine. In fact, I volunteered for Nam, and when I wanted to extend my cruise, Lynn said, "You shouldn't do that." We had 3 children, and our baby was born 2 weeks before I went to Nam. So one cruise is all we had.
Was Westmoreland your guy at the time?
He wasn't my guy, but he was there in country. Yes, that was the problem. he was not a Marine, that's for sure.
No. Do you have you're a funny guy. Any other incidences that we should be kind of bringing out of you with there?
Well, not really. A couple of things that stand out. We had some action in the yard, and I went down and I found it was a Molotov cocktail and a weapon from one of the guys that had come infiltrated and gone away. But that was not a big deal. We just reported, and that was the end of it. That's the only instance of invasion that we're aware of in the yard.
Right.
I did have one of my troops die in my arms. That was a sad thing. They were loading barrels on trucks for transportation out of the yard. And I had been out there myself loading them, and I knew what it was all about. And I saw this kid up there and directing the barrel chimes to put the lighters on. And I said, you can't direct there. You have to direct from the ground or from the platform. Don't get so close. Well, sure enough, he was where he wasn't supposed to be, and a barrel fell on him, killed him. That was very, very sad, but that was the worst thing that happened to me. I don't remember being fired on in anger. I probably was a few times, but I never had to assault anybody or do anything in country because that was not my job as a liaison in the supply yard. But I enjoyed it.
Well, like I say, I'm envisioning McHale's Navy, Bill Radack. Then you come back. Did you continue to stay in the service after your term was over?
Yes, we stayed. We served 12 years. I was passed over for promotion, and because of the cutback in the size of the service, they asked me to go. I had to resign, but I was a regular Marine, and I had to resign, or they didn't know what to do with me. Some gal had protested because they were letting her go, and it was a legal thing at the time of my discharge. But I said, I'm not getting paid and recognized for what I do. I'm not getting promoted. We'll go and try something else, which is what we did.
Now, I'm just noting your bio here that you captained the USMC, the Marine swim team, for 4 years at Barstow, California. Who did you compete against?
Well, that's a different story. We competed, our primary meet was 29 Palms, which is a desert location where they fire long guns, and they have a base there. Well, a colonel, the lieutenant colonel there, was also a swimmer, and he challenged us, so we worked it out where we got special privileges. We got an hour or two off from work every day to work out at the pool, and I put together some kids and we swam. We went to the meet, and I think we had about 8 or 9 swimmers, and I said, now we can't compete in all the events unless we can swim more than one. Would that be all right? And he goes, oh, sure, yeah, that's fine. Well, it turned out halfway through the meet, he said, now, you can't do that anymore. I said, wait a minute, Colonel, we had the agreement. We were going to swim multiple days. You can't do that. I had a kid from Hawaii, Coleman, who was a good freestyler, and I could swim several strokes, so we were capturing the meet, just the two of us and what we were able to pick up. And he changed the rules in the middle of the meet, so we lost that meet. But that's a memory that's pretty clear. He swam backstroke, but he used the old-fashioned backstroke, and of course he couldn't compete with the modern backstroke swimmer. But that was fun. And that's, just a couple meets, just enough to give the kids something else.
But it gave you some privileges.
Yes, sir. I also played judo from Barstow. No, later on, judo was from Camp Lejeune, but I went to the All-Marine Judo Tournament. And first contest I had was the black belt, and I was able to beat him, and that was quite a thing for a white belt. Sure. Very unusual, but the next guy was a brown belt, and he took care of me, so I was out of that second competition. But that was kind of fun to go to that.
Man, you're jack of all trades.
Well, that's the way you were. As a Marine, you did that. You were a lawyer, drill sergeant, supply officer. I mean, it went on. You qualified on the Rangers, of course. And, you did a lot of things. That's what was fun about the service. It wasn't one thing. You were very busy doing a lot of different things.
So when you got home, was it hard to get acclimated, having left the service, which has its own discipline, all of a sudden coming home with Lynn, and you got 3 kids at the time? 3 more?
No, just 4. 4 children for me, yeah. But yeah, no, not at all. I was glad to be home, of course, and we were at our last duty station. I flew home to interview with Payne Weber at the time, and I got that job, so my transition was direct. I came home before the children started work, got the house. They came cross country, and then we settled in Jamestown, primarily because this is where our family is and our roots are. We like Jamestown. We still like Jamestown.
Where was Lynn from, Bill?
Lynn came from Bradford in high school, and that's another story. I went to practice. I got a call from this gal. Do you have I see your name in the paper. Are you Bill Radack? Yeah. How do I get to be on the swim team? I said, well, call this guy. I gave her Dick's phone number, and she called him, and he said, yeah, come to practice 7 o'clock. I came in that morning. I wasn't aware she was going to be there because that was between Dick and her. And I was at the end of the pool. I looked up, and from the girls the other end of the pool came this 2-piece red bathing suit. And I couldn't believe it. I never saw anything so pretty in my life. Holy shit, what is this? And it turned out to be Lynn. Well, Dick asked her if she would go out with me the first 3 times we had a date. And I said, Coach, I want to take her to a movie. He said, well, ask her. I said, Dick, you ask her out. I don't dare. And she said, well, you ask her out. I said, what if she says no? She'll probably say yes if she went out with you twice. I said, okay. So I got my courage and I asked her to go. And she went to the movies with me. After that, we built our life together.
Isn't that a great story?
It was great. She's been a great wife and good mother. Good Marine Corps wife.
Yeah. Thank God for Dick Powder.
Yes, for sure. Very, very important.
Swimming. Swimming brought you together.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it.
Yeah.
In fact, at the BAC, which is the biggest meet we went to, Buffalo Athletic Club in the senior year, she was there and we warmed up and she was massaging my calf muscles getting ready for the race, which was pretty nice. But I can remember that final race because it was unusual. I trained in a 20-yard pool, and for some reason mentally, on the last, I was swimming very well. In fact, I was in better than my best time, I'm sure. But I flipped in 20 yards instead of 25 yards. And there wasn't any wall there, so I had to go back on my back and finish the race. I think I did 105 plus, which was plenty to win, but the point was, I missed that turn because I trained on a 20-yard course instead of a 25-yard course, and mentally it just didn't work. I was ready to turn. I want to get that last lap in. You got to be at the wall before you turn. You know that, Greg. You got to touch on your back. But I wasn't DQ'd because, of course, I swam backstroke after I got real weird. But yeah, Lynn was great. She dove and she swam. She's a very good athlete. She plays golf now when she can. She got a torn knee, so she's not playing currently. But she's been a good athlete and had a good spouse.
So but you continued on your, aside from your professional career with Payne Weber and ultimately finding your way to UBS, but you also the master's class. I mean, you're out there continuing to swim after your Marine days are over. So what's continued to motivate you to get up and do it?
Just competition.
Yeah.
As I say, I'm not doing what I should be doing at all in workouts, and I'm just starting now to recover from all the nonsense with the health. Just it goes on and on and on. We had to have a bypass. We had cancer, prostate cancer, which we all have. I had a throat cancer, and they took out a gallbladder, and just don't have stamina to swim really. I'm trying to build up now, very, very slowly, very, very gradually, very, very little. I swim a 40 instead of a 400, for example. It's a set, up and down, that's all I swim. They used to be up and down 20 times just for a base, and that would go on 4 times. You do that 4 sets. So it's very little compared to what it was. But in Masters swimming, success is because so many people don't compete. There are swimmers that are very good. I went to Canada for a Canadian national a few years ago, and there were many swimmers there that didn't compete. They just came to support their teammates. They swam for exercise and health. That was kind of fun. But it's really just a health thing. It's nothing to do with mentally. I like to beat people and do the best I can.
Well, and of course your sidekick Judy continues to marvel at.
Well, I did not think very highly of the competitors that would do like 25-yard races at it. You know, they're wasting their time for you. So in the hundreds, the 200s, but Judy is an enigma. Nobody that age is swimming, and no matter where she goes, she's the only one that's not just in her waist class, but there's nobody down on this or down on this one. Nobody's swimming at 90. Are you kidding me? She was up and down. She's very, very, very good swimmer. For that age, it's unbelievable. Yeah. First time I saw that type of swimmer was in Buffalo at a national, not little old, they were tall, but their skin was all wrinkly and until they got in the water. Then, well, now my skin is like that. And, you know, it's different. It's not the same. And those people that are old and doing 25, they're also competing and they're doing the best they can. It's different levels of skill. And the older, your body just doesn't do what it's supposed to do anymore. Okay. It's the way it is. But it's fun. Yeah, Judy is marvelous. In fact, she's a very good friend, as his son David. David takes care of me, babysits me, takes me to golf, puts my bag in the cart. I mean, he's really a gentleman. And he's a good stick. He shoots in the 70s, and I shoot in 100 plus range. Judy can hit the ball from here to the wall. He takes her out once a week. Very patient. Great golfer himself, but a great person. David takes good care of his mom and looks after her. It's nice relationship.
So what's the question we should have asked that we have not asked, Bill? You knew you were coming here today, and you probably thought, gee, I wonder if they're going to talk about this.
I think you covered everything, Greg. I'm very pleased. I did a lot of thinking from the time that I knew the interview was coming, and I was trying to cover a lot of ground with my mind. My main thing was I want to be sure and talk before I get so old I can't remember anything, which I think I accomplished. I'm not as sharp as I was, but I'm not completely gone yet either. So I'm pleased with the timing of the interview, but I can't think of anything you didn't cover, Greg. It's been a very pleasant experience. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you. And there you are in the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, and there's a guy named Bill Radack up on the wall.
Thanks, Greg.